Why has this group been targeted for 2,000 years? Why has one specific group faced systematic animosity for over 20 centuries? To find the answer, we have to look much further back than the 20th century. It wasn't just the events of World War II. It wasn't only the Inquisition, the Crusaders, or the Romans. This pattern has appeared throughout almost all of recorded history. From the time of the Roman Empire to the modern day, Jewish people have been persecuted, forced to leave their homes, and blamed for crises they didn't cause. But why? What made them so different that they became constant targets for centuries? Today, we are going to explore a story that is difficult to hear, but absolutely necessary to understand. We are diving into a history of survival against the odds. Before we begin this incredible story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment below telling us which other famous civilization you would like to see in a future video. The Empire of Many Gods. Imagine a world where you could worship any god you wanted, as long as you didn't reject the others. This was the Roman Empire, a superpower that conquered with the sword but also used religious tolerance to keep the peace. In Rome, Egyptians prayed to their ancient gods, Greeks offered sacrifices, and dozens of different cultures brought their beliefs with them. As long as these groups didn't oppose the imperial cult, the worship of the emperor, everything was fine. There was only one thing that could not be negotiated: absolute loyalty to the emperor, who was seen as a living god. Then, everything changed. The Jewish people were not like the other groups Rome had conquered. They didn't have a long list of many gods, they had only one. To make matters more difficult for Rome, their god was placed above all others. They refused to worship statues, images, or divine emperors. To the Romans, this wasn't just a religious difference, it was seen as defiance. It looked like a rebellion disguised as faith. Tacitus, a famous Roman historian who was like an influencer of the 1st century, described them as stubborn and arrogant. The Jews stood out with their some customs. First one is their diet. They didn't eat the same food as everyone else. Then Sabbath. They refused to work on Saturdays. Next is loyalty. They would not worship Caesar. And the last one is isolation. They preferred to keep their own traditions rather than mixing with Roman culture. Eventually, Emperor Tiberius lost his patience with these inflexible customs. In 19 AD, he took a drastic step and ordered the Jews to be expelled from the city of Rome.
From suspicion to exile, the birth of a foreign people. The official excuse for the Roman crackdown was that the Jews were corrupting Roman citizens with their faith. However, the real truth was simpler. Rome didn't know how to handle a group of people who refused to surrender their culture or their spirit. Over time, these religious differences turned into political suspicions, and suspicion eventually turned into violent repression. Between 132 and 136 AD, the massive Bar Kokhba revolt broke out. This was the last major attempt by the Jewish people to liberate their land from Roman rule, but it ended in disaster. The Roman response was brutal. At first, Jerusalem was destroyed and rebuilt as a Roman city. Then, Jews were banned from entering their own holy city, and Jewish traditions and religious practices were strictly forbidden. From this point on, their history as a wandering people officially began. To the Romans, the Jews were a cultural anomaly, a piece that simply didn't fit into the great imperial puzzle. To the Jews, Rome was just another pharaoh trying to break their faith. However, the long-term damage was already done. A dangerous idea started to grow, the belief that Jewish people were impossible to integrate. They began to be seen as a foreign body within the empire. This idea was more frightening to the authorities than any rebel army. When the fear of the other is combined with absolute power, it almost always leads to persecution. This was the beginning of a cycle that would last for centuries. The Great Divide, when Judaism and Christianity split. For centuries, the Romans saw the Jews as a group that was difficult to assimilate. But when Christianity began to spread, a much deeper conflict appeared. Even though this new faith was born from Judaism, it soon began to view its parent religion as an enemy. At first, the followers of Jesus were Jewish. They shared the same scriptures, the same traditions, and the same festivals. However, their beliefs eventually moved in a different direction. For Christians, Jesus was not just a teacher, he was the Messiah and the Son of God. When the majority of the Jewish community did not accept this, a permanent division became inevitable. A powerful and influential doctrine emerged called supersessionism, or replacement theology. According to this belief, Christianity did not just continue Judaism, it replaced it. Secondly, the old covenant between God and the Jews was over, and the church was now the new chosen people. This idea changed everything. Parts of the New Testament began to be interpreted as direct criticisms of the Jewish people. Some argued that the Jews were blind to the truth and only existed to show God's grace to other nations. As the message was distorted, resentment grew. It didn't take long for some Christian leaders to start labeling Jews with dangerous titles, such as enemies of God. St. John Chrysostom, a famous and powerful church speaker, used his authority to call them unholy. At this stage, there wasn't always widespread physical violence, but the theological hostility began to turn into social exclusion. The Jews were no longer just a different culture, they were being painted as a spiritual threat. From laws to blood, the age of the Crusades. As early as the 4th century, the Council of Elvira took a hard line. They forbade Christians from marrying Jews or even sharing a meal with them. This was the beginning of a long history of segregation. However, it didn't take long for this separation to turn into violence. In the late 11th century, Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade. The official goal was to liberate the Holy Land from Muslim control. But for many crusaders, the war began long before they reached Jerusalem. They decided to demonstrate their religious passion by attacking Jewish communities right there in Europe. In cities like Worms, Mainz, Cologne, and Metz, thousands of Jewish people were brutally murdered. In the city of Speyer, even the local bishop tried to protect the Jewish community, but he was unsuccessful. The Crusaders offered a cruel choice: convert to Christianity or die. To the Crusaders, the Jews were seen as internal enemies because they had rejected the Christian faith. What was supposed to be a holy war became a series of endless massacres. The message to the world was clear: staying loyal to their ancient faith made Jews permanent targets. It is a tragic irony of history. A religion that preached love for one's neighbor made a violent exception for the Jewish people. This theological disagreement had officially turned into systematic violence. The spiritual divide between the two groups was a wound that never fully healed. In fact, it planted the seeds for modern anti-Semitism. After the Crusades, the hatred didn't disappear. It just found new, even darker ways to justify itself. Rumors began to spread that were more dangerous than anything seen before. The power of a lie, blood and gold. It all began in Norwich, England in 1144. When a young boy was found dead, a monk accused the local Jewish community of murdering him as part of a secret ritual. There was no evidence, but this was the birth of one of the most dangerous lies in history, the blood libel. The story was completely false, but it was effective. People began to believe that Jews kidnapped Christian children for religious rituals. It didn't matter that there was no proof or that Jewish leaders denied it. Truth was replaced by fear, and fear led to looting, torture, and massacres. Many rulers saw these accusations as a chance to seize property or cancel their own debts. To make things worse, the church began to pass humiliating laws. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council decreed that Jews had to wear specific clothing or badges to identify themselves. This made it easy for anyone to point them out, avoid them, or attack them. It was a carefully designed system to keep them out of society. If Jewish people couldn't own land, join professional guilds, or work common jobs, how were they supposed to survive? This is where a key piece of the puzzle appears: money. There was a gap in society where the Jews played an important role. The church forbade Christians from charging interest on loans, and the solution was banks. As trade grew, Europe needed bankers. Since most other jobs were banned for Jews, money lending became one of the few ways they could earn a living. As a result, they became the lenders to kings and merchants. This was not a choice made out of greed, but out of necessity. However, the narrative shifted once again. People began to claim that Jews were obsessed with gold and greedy. A new, powerful stereotype was born, and medieval art helped spread these images across the continent. The Shadow of the Black Death, a story of fear and fire. In medieval churches and town squares, horrific images were carved into stone. One of the most famous was the Judensau, a disgusting image used to show total contempt for Jewish people. Even today, some of these sculptures remain, like permanent scars that time has refused to heal. At this point, hatred no longer needed logic. It was fueled by religion, politics, and now economic jealousy. Then came the 14th century, and Europe began to burn with fever. The Black Death swept across the continent like a dark shadow, destroying entire cities. There was no cure and no explanation, only terror. In times of extreme fear, logic is often the first thing to die. A rumor began to spread. The water wells were being poisoned. People asked, "Who is doing this?" The finger was pointed at the Jews. Because they often lived in close-knit communities and followed strict hygiene laws, some thought they weren't getting sick as often. In many minds, being different was the same as being guilty. In 1348, a man was brutally tortured until he confessed to a fake plot. He claimed that, under the orders of a rabbi, he had poisoned the water in cities like Venice and Toulouse. This confession, forced out through pain and screams, was the spark that lit the fuse. What followed was a wave of irrational and terrifying violence. Strasbourg, on February 14, 1349, nearly 900 Jews were burned alive in a public square. Basel and Zurich, Entire communities were wiped out in violent riots called pogroms. The plague did not stop, but the thirst for revenge only grew. It didn't matter that there was no evidence. It didn't even matter that Jewish people were also dying from the plague. For the angry crowds, the lie had become the truth. Fear had once again become an excuse for murder. Some historians estimate that during these years, nearly 60% of Europe's Jewish population disappeared. Tragically, many did not die from the disease. They died in the flames. From religious hatred to pseudoscience. Even in the middle of the Black Death, there were voices of reason. Pope Clement VI actually tried to stop the massacres by issuing official documents called papal bulls to defend the Jewish people. But it was like trying to put out a forest fire with a cup of water. The angry crowds didn't want logic. They wanted someone to blame. There were small exceptions. In Milan, the Duke chose to protect the Jews because he knew they were essential to the city's economy. But Milan was a rare island of safety on a continent in flames. By the time the plague ended, it had left behind more than just empty towns. It left hearts filled with a habit of hatred. Fast forward to the 1800s, Europe was vibrating with progress. This was the era of the steam engine, electricity, and life-saving vaccines. But alongside real science, a dangerous pseudoscience began to grow. Antisemitism was about to mutate once again. In 1879, a German journalist named Wilhelm Marr coined a new word, antisemitism. He didn't want the hatred to be about religion anymore. He wanted it to sound rational and scientific. The new narrative claimed that Jews weren't just a different religion, they were a different race. Writers like Arthur de Gobineau published scientific papers claiming that human races were not equal. This led to eugenics, a distorted version of biology used to rank people by their genetics. You can guess where the Jewish people were placed in this fake hierarchy, at the very bottom. Once again, science was being used as a weapon. This led to new, concrete restrictions. Jews were often excluded from universities. They were barred from many high-level professions. New laws prevented them from marrying non-Jews. Many countries began to strictly limit Jewish immigration. All of these cruel actions were justified by so-called scientific studies. The stage was being set for the darkest century in human history. The Dreyfus Affair and the birth of the Big Lie. Even in a modern country like France, the old hatred found new life. In 1894, the Dreyfus Affair shocked the nation. Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish officer in the French army, was falsely accused of treason. Before his trial even started, the newspapers had already found him guilty in the eyes of the public. People didn't just want justice, they wanted to see a Jewish man fail. Although Dreyfus was eventually proven innocent and exonerated, the damage was done. The message to all of Europe was clear. Simply being Jewish was enough to make you a suspect. This climate of suspicion fueled the creation of conspiracy theories that, unfortunately, still exist today. The most famous is a book called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This was a completely fake text that claimed Jewish leaders had a secret plan to take over the world. Even though the book was exposed as a fabrication, a total lie, many times, many people chose to believe it anyway. It gave them a reason for their fear. With ink and paper, the ground was being prepared for something much worse than anything seen in the Middle Ages. When racism starts to hide behind the mask of science or national security, it no longer needs to explain itself. It stops being just an opinion and starts becoming. Governments begin to write discrimination into their rule books. Hatred becomes a part of how a country is run. When a society is fed these lies every day, tragedy becomes almost impossible to avoid.
The darkest hour. The Holocaust. After World War I, Germany was a broken nation, defeated, humiliated, and ruined. In their desperation, millions of people were looking for someone to blame. They needed a face for their pain, and Adolf Hitler gave them one. Hitler did not invent anti-Semitism. He inherited it from the centuries of history we've just explored. He turned that hatred into a national doctrine. In his worldview, Jewish people were the root of every problem, from economic crises to political decay. He claimed they were a racial cancer that had to be removed. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws made this hatred legal. These laws stripped Jewish people of their rights. Relationships between Jews and non-Jews were banned. Their rights as Germans were revoked. They were kicked out of schools and universities. Suddenly, they were no longer neighbors or co-workers. They were the others. When World War II began, this exclusion turned into confinement. First came the ghettos, like the one in Warsaw, starving, overcrowded neighborhoods surrounded by barbed wire. In January 1942, at the Wannsee Conference, Nazi officials drafted what they called the final solution. It was the coldest phrase ever used to plan a genocide. A terrifying, organized machinery was born. Camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor were built with one goal: extermination. Upon arrival, prisoners were separated. Those seen as fit were sent to forced labor. The rest were sent immediately to gas chambers. Doctors like Joseph Mengele carried out inhuman experiments on children and twins. When they were no longer useful, they were murdered. Perhaps the most chilling reality is that it wasn't only the Nazis. Across Europe, ordinary people, neighbors, shopkeepers, and workers collaborated in the deportations. Some did it out of fear, others out of hatred, but many simply out of indifference. In just a few years, 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population was murdered. It is estimated that 6 million people died, not from disease or as soldiers in war, but simply for being who they were. By the time the world saw the piles of bodies and the suitcases labeled with names, it was too late. Centuries of hatred had reached their climax, and a civilization that called itself modern had failed in the most brutal way imaginable.
Why we must remember. Today, anti-Semitism has changed its appearance once again. It doesn't always hide behind religion or fake science. Sometimes it disguises itself as politics, ideology, or even activism. But the core mechanism remains the same, turning one specific group into a scapegoat for all of society's problems. The language changes, but the patterns of violence do not. We have been here before. History may not repeat itself exactly, but it follows the same steps: isolation, suspicion, lies, and silence. Hatred is not natural, it is taught. Hatred doesn't just disappear on its own. It is inherited, taught, and reinvented for every new generation. If we do not confront it with education and empathy, it always returns. When it resurfaces, it doesn't always start with uniforms and torches. Often, it begins with harmless jokes or comments that normalize contempt, until one day, it is too late. Remembering the past is not just an option, it is an obligation. If we forget what happened, we risk living through it again. The solution isn't found only in laws or stone memorials. It lives in our ability to recognize the warning signs in our daily lives, speak out when we hear hatred disguised as just an opinion, refuse to stay silent when others are targeted. Remembering isn't about looking backward, it's about preventing that same dark abyss from opening up again. Our goal should not just be never again, but not even once again. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey. This story is a difficult one, but it is one that we must continue to tell. If you found this video insightful and you are passionate about exploring the deeper truths of our history, please consider subscribing to the channel. By joining our community, you'll stay updated on our upcoming videos and discover more fascinating, essential stories from our past. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching, for learning, and for remembering. See you in the next video.